Some people express creativity through art. Others express it by gluing trash together and confidently calling it handmade. And just when you think you've seen the worst possible attempt at craftsmanship, trust me, the universe has far lower standards. 1. A man proudly posted a handmade lamp that began its life as a taxidermied raccoon and ended its life as the most haunting light source ever offered on Craigslist. The raccoon, once a majestic woodland creature, had been repurposed into a standing floor lamp by attaching a metal rod through its spine, wiring a bulb socket to where its soul used to be, and topping the whole thing with a shade so crooked it looked like the raccoon had been drinking. The listing confidently described it as rustic charm, which is a bold phrase to use for something that looks like a rejected prop from a low-budget horror film about electricity going rogue. The seller insisted it was functional art, which is technically true if functional means capable of creating lifelong distrust of lamps. And astonishingly, someone out there clicked the listing thinking this wasn't even close to the weirdest part of their day. 2. A self-declared upcycler unveiled a handmade coffee table created entirely from the shattered remains of an old flat-screen TV, because nothing says cozy living room centerpiece like furniture that looks like a crime scene involving electronics. The table featured jagged edges sealed with something that might have been glue or heartbreak, 4 wobbling legs scavenged from unrelated IKEA orphans, and a surface so uneven it could turn a cup of coffee into a physics experiment. The creator described it as postmodern design, which in this case translates directly to gravity is optional and regret is included. The listing also bragged that it was surprisingly lightweight, a phrase that immediately suggests it will collapse if you breathe too confidently near it. A prospective buyer asked whether it was safe. The seller responded, "Don't sit on it." A rule, by the way, that applies to every object in this story except maybe a spoon. 3. Someone decided the world needed a handmade decorative centerpiece crafted entirely from melted plastic army men, fused together into a lumpy sculpture resembling a battle where everyone lost, including the laws of aesthetics. The creator claimed it symbolized the futility of war, but the sculpture more convincingly symbolized a heat gun left unattended. The piece had a greenish, glossy shimmer that suggested it might emit fumes if emotionally stressed, and it was mounted on a wooden base clearly borrowed from a forgotten 8th grade science fair. The listing proudly stated, "Conversation starter," which is certainly true, assuming the conversation begins with, "Why is it sticky?" and ends with, "Let's leave before it gains sentience." The seller priced it at $120, explaining that true art takes time, a statement that implies several hours of staring at a pile of melted toy soldiers before deciding to post it online and ruin someone's algorithm forever. 4. A seller showcased a handmade couch that appeared to violate at least 4 building codes and possibly several international treaties. It began as wooden pallets stacked unevenly, wrapped in upholstery fabric that looked suspiciously like old curtains, and reinforced with rope tied in knots that sailors would describe as deeply concerning. The seating surface consisted of foam chunks with all the softness of a stale loaf of bread, arranged in a way that suggested the couch had personally offended gravity. The listing tried to reassure shoppers by stating "super sturdy," which was immediately disproven by a visible crack running through the frame like a foreshadowing of disaster. The creator insisted it was bohemian, a word often used when structurally compromised feels too honest. Anyone bold enough to sit on it risked experiencing free fall indoors. And yet, the seller confidently noted, "Pick up only," as though transporting this thing were the real danger. 5. A woman attempted to sell a handmade custom mug that had the chaotic energy of a pottery class taught by someone who only learned about ceramics from television. The mug was lopsided enough to look seasick, with a handle placed so high on the rim that lifting it required the wrist flexibility of a trained dancer. The glaze had pooled at the bottom in ominous swirls resembling meteorological hazards, and the inside featured a crater that guaranteed any liquid poured into it would remain trapped forever like a beverage oubliette. The listing proudly stated it was microwave safe, which is a bold promise considering the mug already looked like it barely survived room temperature. The seller encouraged buyers to give it as a gift, ideally to someone they never intended to see again. It was the sort of mug that makes you rethink drinking anything that isn't already packaged by licensed professionals. 6. A guy posted a self-described handmade bookshelf that had the structural integrity of a political promise. The shelves were repurposed planks of mismatched wood held together with nails inserted at angles so baffling they seemed to defy both logic and carpentry. The entire unit leaned dramatically to one side, as though attempting to escape its own existence, and the listing photos showed it propped up by a stack of magazines acting as emotional support. The creator defended the tilt, calling it dynamic design, which is one way to describe a piece of furniture that looks moments away from self-destructing. He emphasized its large capacity, though the only capacity it realistically offered was the capacity to collapse under the weight of a paperback. The asking price was $80, justified by claiming it was made with real wood, a statement that conveniently ignores the fact that real wood isn't obligated to suffer like this. 7. A seller unveiled a handmade wall clock crafted from an old frying pan, because nothing says accurate timekeeping like cookware that still has char marks from past culinary mistakes. The clock hands were glued haphazardly to the center, slightly off axis, creating a timepiece that communicated less timeless elegance and more time is a suggestion. The numbers had been written around the rim in marker, some upside down, some sideways, and one apparently having a crisis of identity. The listing described it as industrial chic, a phrase that here simply means found in a kitchen and lightly assaulted with craft supplies. Potential buyers were assured it works great, a statement technically true only if one measures success by the clock's unwavering ability to always be wrong. It promised to add character to any room, a diplomatic way of saying it would confuse guests and lower their expectations for everything else hanging on the wall. 8. Someone tried to sell a handmade birdhouse that resembled a tiny Airbnb for birds that had angered the zoning board. Constructed from scrap plywood, rusty hinges, and optimism, it featured an entrance hole so jagged it looked like a woodpecker had filed a complaint. The roof was a patchwork of shingles, salvaged from who knows where, and one corner drooped like the house was emotionally exhausted. The creator insisted it was wildlife-friendly, despite its unmistakable aura of tetanus. A single photo showed the birdhouse leaning drunkenly against a tree, silently pleading for stability. The listing suggested it was perfect for nature lovers, which is debatable, unless the nature lover in question also enjoys watching birds question their life choices. It was priced aggressively high for something that might blow away in a firm breeze and take any innocent occupant with it. 9. A well-meaning optimist posted a handmade dining set consisting of a table and 2 chairs that looked like they had been built during a natural disaster by someone under emotional duress. The table's legs were all different lengths, forcing it to stand only when positioned like a tripod compromised by existential doubt. The chairs, meanwhile, had backs that tilted at angles, suggesting they were trying to avoid eye contact. The seller described the set as rustic simplicity, a phrase that in this case translates to gravity hasn't won yet, but it's ahead. The finish was uneven, with random glossy patches that looked suspiciously like accidental contact with cooking oil. The listing boasted that it was hand-sanded, which probably explains the visible fingerprints embedded in the varnish. It was marketed as perfect for small apartments, presumably because small apartments offer less room for the furniture to fall over spectacularly. 10. A person attempted to sell a handmade towel rack constructed from several bent forks welded together, creating a metallic bouquet of regret. The forks protruded from a scrap metal base at angles unfit for any towel that valued stability. The entire piece had the ambiance of an art installation created during an emotional breakthrough. The seller called it functional minimalism, which is accurate only if minimalism means minimizing expectations. The welds appeared to have been done by someone attempting forgiveness rather than craftsmanship, and the whole thing leaned so sharply to the left it looked politically motivated. The listing insisted it was surprisingly sturdy, a phrase that immediately raises suspicion. Mounting it on a wall would require a bravery normally reserved for extreme sports. And yet, the creator priced it confidently, hoping someone out there wanted decor that whispers, "Your guests will ask questions you cannot answer." 11. A creator proudly offered a handmade floor mirror framed with mismatched spoons glued around the perimeter, giving the impression of a reflective shrine dedicated to cereal. The spoons overlapped haphazardly, some facing outward like chrome petals, and others glued backward as if protesting their involvement. The mirror itself bore streaks and scratches that suggested the creator cleaned it, using either sandpaper or unresolved emotions. The listing described it as whimsical elegance, which is a bold phrase for something that looks like the bathroom mirror of a chaotic breakfast deity. The spoons rattled faintly in the wind, yes, even indoors, suggesting the entire structure was one sneeze away from spontaneous self-dismantling. Potential buyers were assured it was one of a kind, a guarantee upheld not by artistic brilliance, but by the universe quietly agreeing that one is enough for everyone. 12. Someone crafted a handmade jewelry organizer that consisted of a repurposed rake head screwed into a piece of driftwood, creating a display that oscillated wildly between rustic charm and hardware store panic. The rake still bore traces of soil, giving the impression that the jewelry might sprout roots if left too long. The driftwood backing, described as artisanal, looked more like something a dog had reconsidered chewing. The seller praised its natural aesthetic, though the overall vibe was less nature and more abandoned tool shed chic. The hooks were uneven, ensuring necklaces would hang at angles that implied emotional distress. The listing confidently claimed it was perfect for any bedroom, failing to clarify that perfect in this case means likely to confuse you before coffee. Still, the seller insisted it was a conversation piece, presumably because anyone who sees it will immediately ask why it exists. 13. A handmade custom chair appeared online looking like furniture that had survived an incident it refuses to talk about. The seat was woven from old seatbelts, which is creative if the goal is to let guests experience the thrill of airline turbulence while sitting still. The frame, built from pipes the seller found on the property, raised several unanswered questions, chief among them. Whose property and why did the pipes look haunted? The seller boasted the chair had industrial strength, which is a bold claim considering it sagged visibly in the photo. The seatbelts were mismatched colors, giving it an aesthetic that can generously be described as accidental rainbow. The listing said it was ergonomic, which is an interesting interpretation of ergonomics, since the chair clearly wanted to throw people out of it. Yet the creator believed someone would pay good money to sit in a safety lecture disguised as furniture. 14. A self-styled artisan offered a handmade wine rack made from old plumbing pipes and fittings that still bore the faint smell of their previous career. The structure was arranged in a serpentine configuration that made storing bottles feel like feeding a mechanical python. The pipes curved in ways that made no engineering sense, creating a rack that defied not only symmetry, but possibly spiritual balance. The seller called it edgy, which is accurate because every edge looked sharp enough to invalidate your tetanus shot. The rack could hold 6 bottles if you ignored the risk of them rolling out like escape attempts. The listing described it as perfect for modern kitchens, though few modern kitchens require appliances that look stolen from a dystopian maintenance closet. Still, the creator priced it confidently, as though stainless steel tubes whispering old secrets were a selling feature. 15. A particularly ambitious creator attempted to sell a handmade indoor fountain constructed from stacked salad bowls, a repurposed aquarium pump, and a generous amount of decorative rocks that looked like they'd been collected during a midlife crisis. The water flowed unevenly from bowl to bowl, producing a sound less like a calming brook and more like a plumbing emergency rehearsing for disaster. LED lights had been added for ambiance, but their flickering gave the fountain an unsettling medical drama glow. The listing insisted the fountain created instant relaxation, though any observer would reasonably conclude it created instant desire to turn it off. The setup sat in a baking tray acting as a spill guard, which is a red flag so large it deserves its own parade. And yet, the seller remained convinced someone out there deeply wanted a fountain that looked like a kitchen tried to become a spa and failed gracefully. 16. A handmade cat tower appeared on Craigslist that looked less like a playground for pets and more like a lawsuit rehearsing its opening statement. The creator had stacked 3 carpet scraps, 2 cinder blocks, a broom handle, and what appeared to be a prayer, securing everything with duct tape in the same way someone secures their emotions. Barely. The photos showed the tower sagging to one side, leaning like it desperately needed a cigarette break. The listing promised it was great for active cats, which implies an unspoken disclaimer that cats less agile than Olympic gymnasts would be in immediate danger. The top platform was so small it resembled a postage stamp, yet the seller insisted it could hold multiple pets, presumably as long as those pets were imaginary. Every angle of this contraption whispered the same message: your cat deserves better. Still, the builder charged a premium, confident that pet owners might accept chaos if it came with a carpet sample. 17. A self-described metal artist posted a handmade candle holder forged from old bicycle chains that clearly hadn't been cleaned since the bike's last midlife crisis. The chains were welded into a spiral that looked suspiciously like a rusted snake questioning its life choices, and the entire piece possessed a patina that might qualify as a biohazard. The candle sat precariously atop the structure, wobbling like a nervous reality show contestant. The listing claimed the design was inspired by motion, which tracks considering the candle appeared moments away from sprinting off the edge. The metalwork was described as raw and unrestrained, a delicate euphemism meaning sharp enough to invalidate every bandage in your home. The seller recommended it as a romantic centerpiece, presumably for couples who enjoy ambience mixed with mild fear. It was priced with bold confidence, as though rust and risk were unique design features instead of warnings. 18. A would-be craft innovator unveiled a handmade wine glass set made from cut-off soda bottles, their edges sanded with the enthusiasm of someone who owned sandpaper but not common sense. The stems were wooden dowels glued on at angles that conveyed genuine existential confusion, and each glass tilted in a different direction like a synchronized anxiety performance. The listing advertised them as eco-friendly elegance, though nothing says elegance like drinking Merlot from a container that once held lemon-lime regret. Despite the uneven rims and visible glue fingerprints, the creator insisted they were perfect for entertaining guests, specifically guests who don't mind risking lip lacerations. One photo showed the glasses arranged on a tablecloth with dramatic lighting, attempting to disguise the fact that they looked like a DIY project assigned as punishment. Yet the seller remained hopeful, noting they were one of a kind, a statement no reasonable person would argue. 19. A creative soul attempted to sell a hand-painted globe that had once been a perfectly useful educational tool before being attacked with acrylic paint and unrestrained optimism. The continents had been reimagined into unidentifiable blobs, the oceans were streaked like someone sneezed during the painting process, and the equator had vanished entirely in what can only be described as cartographic rebellion. The listing claimed it was a fresh perspective on geography, which is technically accurate in the same way falling off a map offers a fresh perspective on gravity. The creator proudly proclaimed it museum-worthy, though they did not specify which museum, or whether that museum specialized in crimes against cartography. The globe's stand had been spray-painted gold, except for the parts accidentally missed, giving it a two-tone finish that suggested ongoing negotiations between ambition and reality. Still, the price suggested someone out there might want to decorate with geopolitical confusion. 20. A handmade coat rack appeared composed entirely of mismatched doorknobs bolted to a plank of wood that had clearly lived a previous life as something sturdier. The doorknobs jutted out at heights only an abstract artist could rationalize, some facing upward like confused mushrooms, and others installed sideways as if defying architectural convention. The wood still bore its original dents, scratches, and what might have been coffee stains from 1997. The listing described it as vintage industrial, which here seemed to mean constructed under emotional distress. The seller insisted it holds coats beautifully, a claim impossible to verify since one of the doorknobs had already fallen off in the photo. The entire piece had the energy of a prop from a movie where the set designer left early, yet the creator priced it assertively, fully confident that someone needed a reminder of entropy hung directly by their front door. 21. A proud minimalist attempted to sell a handmade chair that was, in reality, a single wooden plank balanced between two cement bricks like a furniture dare. The plank bowed visibly in the center, as though remembering the weight of past regrets, and the bricks were mismatched in height, creating a seating angle best described as punitive. The listing praised its clean lines, which is a generous phrase for something that only has 3 components, because a fourth might have required forethought. The creator called it perfect for meditation, likely because anyone attempting to sit on it would spend several reflective minutes questioning every decision that brought them here. The whole construction vibrated slightly in the photo, suggesting even inanimate objects can experience anxiety. And still, the seller promised it was surprisingly comfortable, a statement that raises serious questions about every chair this person has ever used. 22. A free-spirited designer advertised a handmade light fixture consisting of fairy lights stuffed into an old glass jug, resulting in a glowing bottle that looked like a firefly colony held hostage. The jug still had residue from whatever beverage it once contained, giving the light a faint amber tint reminiscent of bad decisions made in dim bars. The listing said it created warm, inviting ambience, though there's nothing more inviting than a lamp that appears moments away from hatching a swarm. The creator had wrapped the jug's neck with twine described as rustic, though it looked more like someone panicked halfway through crafting and reached for the nearest string. The cord exit was drilled through the glass in a way that might generously be called ambitious, or more accurately, reckless. Still, the seller envisioned it in modern living rooms everywhere, gently glowing with trapped energy and poor judgment. 23. A determined hobbyist listed a handmade dog bed, constructed from an old drawer lined with fabric scraps that looked like they were salvaged from a rejected quilting project. The drawer's original handles, still attached, created an odd aesthetic where the bed looked like it might roll away if offended. The fabric padding was uneven, forming mysterious hills and valleys that any dog would interpret as emotional commentary. The seller called it repurposed chic, which is one way to describe a bed that carries the energy of neglected furniture given a second life it did not request. The listing emphasized sturdiness, though one corner sagged noticeably, giving the bed the same posture as someone tired of answering emails. Photos showed it staged with a stuffed animal, presumably to distract from its structural compromises. Pricing suggested a confidence often found only in motivational posters and craft fairs at small-town elementary schools. 24. A self-taught artisan attempted to distribute a handmade mirror mosaic, constructed entirely from broken compact mirrors glued onto plywood. The shards formed no discernible pattern, creating a chaotic reflective surface that turned every reflected face into a cubist masterpiece nobody asked for. The plywood backing bowed in the middle, offering a funhouse distortion that the seller claimed was an intentional design choice. The edges were sharp enough to qualify as weapons, though this was framed not as a safety hazard but as bold texture. The creator promised it would brighten any room, which is technically accurate since it reflected light in every direction, especially the unwanted ones. One photo showed it leaning against a wall, casting reflections so fragmented it looked like reality itself was buffering. Yet the listing remained dramatically confident, calling it a transformative visual experience, which it truly was, provided one defined transformation as optical chaos. 25. A person with a surplus of determination and a shortage of tools unveiled a handmade garden bench, built from reclaimed wooden shipping crates arranged in a way that implied the bench might transform into a trap at any moment. The seat had slats spaced wide enough to lose household objects, and possibly smaller pets, between them. The backrest tilted backwards so aggressively it demanded upper body commitment. The listing called it sturdy outdoor furniture, though the crates still bore warning labels advising no one to sit on them. Several rusty nails protruded at angles that suggested the bench was actively defending itself. The seller insisted it was perfect for patios, though it was unclear whether patios remained perfect afterward. The price reflected the creator's optimism rather than the bench's stability, hinting that someone, somewhere, might prefer danger in their outdoor seating arrangement. 26. A self-proclaimed inventor showcased a handmade spice rack, fashioned from old test tubes mounted onto a plank of wood that still had faint chalk markings from a past life in a classroom. The tubes were secured with metal clamps that appeared to have been tightened using improvisation rather than tools, and the whole structure suggested a chemistry set that had dropped out of college. The listing described it as scientific elegance, which is amusing given the tube's noticeable tilt and the fact that several still smelled faintly of their previous unidentified contents. The seller recommended filling them with herbs for culinary flair, though the presentation felt more like preparing potions for a dinner party gone awry. The creator believed proudly that the rack brought order to any kitchen, though its most apparent contribution was raising questions no spice rack should raise. 27. A craft enthusiast posted a handmade wall shelf made from an old skateboard, trucks still attached, providing the unique opportunity for stored items to appear as though they were preparing for downhill competition. The skate deck bore scuffs from prior use, giving the shelf an ambiance that screamed adolescent asphalt memories. Mounted on the wall at a slight angle, it transformed everything placed upon it into a slow-motion gravity experiment. The seller praised it as urban chic decor, which is accurate if one interprets chic loosely and urban as synonymous with found near a community skate park. The listing assured buyers it could hold several pounds, though the truck's bolts looked one sneeze away from retirement. Despite everything, the creator remained steadfast, imagining a home where this shelf would be celebrated rather than gently escorted to the curb. 28. A particularly enthusiastic creator offered a handmade planter carved from an old bowling ball, the finger holes repurposed as drainage in what can only be described as a bold misunderstanding of horticulture. The ball had been painted neon green with streaks of orange, giving it the visual energy of a science experiment that failed motivationally. A large opening had been chiseled into the top with questionable sharpness, producing edges that suggested the creator either lacked proper tools or patience, or both. The listing insisted it was a statement piece, which is accurate because it absolutely said something, though no one could agree on what. It weighed enough to dent flooring, yet the seller called it easily movable, a phrase that hinted at optimism bordering on fiction. Still, the creator was convinced plant lovers everywhere would embrace this gravity-defying horticultural sphere. 29. A maker attempting to blend technology and craft introduced a handmade phone stand created from an old VHS tape that had been hollowed out with the elegance of a fruit dissected by a toddler. The tape's spine folded outward like a mechanical jaw, holding a phone at a precarious angle reminiscent of a coded distress signal. The seller claimed it was retro, which it certainly was, in the same way expired yogurt is retro. The tape still rattled when shaken, suggesting leftover film had been forcibly retired. The listing emphasized its unmatched stability, though the photo clearly showed a phone slowly sliding down its incline, mid-escape. The price hinted the creator thought nostalgia compensated for gravity. It did not. 30. A self-proclaimed eco-designer proudly revealed a handmade shoe organizer built from PVC pipes sliced into sections and glued into a honeycomb pattern that seemed designed to confuse bees. The pipes still bore manufacturing stamps, lending the piece a distinctly industrial hardware aisle aroma. Shoes placed inside were forced into awkward angles, as though being stored for interrogation. The creator called it space-saving innovation, though the structure occupied more space than the shoes ever had. One photo displayed a pair of boots stuffed halfway in, resembling distressed woodland creatures peeking from storm drains. The seller insisted it matched any decor, boldly ignoring the visual fact that it matched none. Despite its unwieldy size and questionable utility, the price reflected a deep and abiding confidence that form triumphs over function when PVC is involved. 31. A devoted crafter posted a handmade wall art installation created entirely from mismatched socks stretched over embroidery hoops, forming a polka-dotted textile gallery of lost laundry. Some socks were striped, some were fuzzy, and one had a cartoon avocado that seemed offended to be included. Arranged in a grid, the hoops created the impression of a children's TV show set experiencing an identity crisis. The listing described it as playful modern art, a phrase that here meant your guests will ask questions you cannot prepare for. The socks drooped in places, revealing their elastic had given up long before the creator did. A few bore suspicious stains, which the seller attributed to character. The piece was marketed as perfect for living rooms, though its true calling appeared to be haunting hallways. Still, the creator priced it boldly, confident that someone wanted to decorate their home with the ghosts of laundry cycles past. Well, that was a guided safari through handcrafted chaos. Declare the dumbest masterpiece in the comments. And if you survive this, you clearly earned the like and subscribe.